Hello, welcome to the journey of grief, becoming us without them. Today we have a panel of parents, and we're going to be talking about what it's like to lose a child, in particular to mental health, addiction, and potentially suicide. And those are scary things, and a lot of people don't know anybody else that happened to, so they don't know what to expect from that process. So we just want to share with all of you the wisdom of these lovely people. So I am a marriage and family therapist, but more importantly, I'm also a widow. And I used to think that I knew all about how to be a good grief counselor because I had read a million things and watched a million videos and talked to a million people. But I'm confident that it wasn't until my husband actually died that I knew anything about grief that was not just theoretical. And anyone who's grieving the loss of a loved one can tell you that nobody gets you because no one has the same experience. They can be similar and helpful, but each and every person goes through a different process that nobody else understands. And so I'm grateful that you're watching this video, and we hope that we can be helpful to you. So I would like to invite each one of you to introduce yourself a little bit. Harry, would you like to go first?
Sure. Hi, my name's Harry. I lost my son 11 years ago this month, the 29th of July. It was his third attempt at suicide, and he was successful. And as I had told Barbara earlier today, I found that I was an MIA for about 8 years. And with a lot of therapy and counseling, time, and self-analyzation, I finally started to come back about a year and a half ago. And now I'm able to look at things completely different, much like what you said, Barbara. What I thought I knew and what I didn't know was pretty amazing. So I was grateful for the opportunity to be part of this panel because, as I have said in my business life, I have plenty of enemies, and I wouldn't wish this even on them. So in my mind, that's pretty intense. So that's my story.
Great. Thanks, Harry.
You're welcome.
Okay, Jason, how about you? What would you like us to know about you?
I'm Jason. I lost my son 3 years ago. Well, coming up on 3 years. It'll be 3 years the week after next. And it was right here in the garage. He overdosed on fentanyl. We had tried to find him help, and it just wasn't happening. There were no he was told that it would be easier if he was an active user, if he had relapsed and tried to get in through the detox system first. But I mean, maybe that's what he was trying to do. Dealing with the grief has been difficult. I don't know if I deal with it very well. I work a lot and I don't talk to anybody about it, at least not anymore. But yeah, it's been very difficult. I guess I'll save anything else for the rest of the meeting.
Thanks, Jason. And Juana, tell us who you are, what's gone on with you.
Okay, I lost my oldest son 3 years ago in the summer, and I lost my dad about 5 weeks later. They both live with me. So another person was living here at the time as well. So within 5 weeks, I lost everybody that was living with me in my home. So that was pretty rough. I had an adjustment from that, but I have a pretty strong spiritual connection, which has helped me deal with my grief surprisingly well, considering how traumatic it was for at the time. And it was just another trauma that I had gone through. So not just another, but it was a subsequent trauma. So I did have a source of strength to get through it, which is still helps me get through it every day, actually. So I know what it was like at first. So it's getting better. It's only been 3 years, but that's it.
Thank you. So the first thing that you all have agreed that you would like to talk about is what it's like to not be able to control the process at all. Can't help the person with their mental illness. You can't get them resources, or the resources that are offered are unhelpful. And it's just like being on a train going downhill with no brakes. And then it suddenly crashes. So that's got to be really hard for people that are trying to fight systems, whether it's medical systems or mental health systems or all of the above, recovery systems. Oh, Harry, talk about kind of your experience of just watching your son struggle and being powerless to do anything to help him.
Well, yeah, 1999, the song Prince has, Party Like It's 1999. 1999 was anything but a party. Everything exploded: career, marriage, the kids with drugs and alcohol. I mean, and my mother died. This all happened by July. And I thought that, and my dad had died when I was 10, so I really didn't have any example of how to be. So I just tried to find people that in my life that looked like solid men and tried to apply that kind of thinking to my kids. And when I found out that the youngest one almost killed himself on the second attempt, that was a wake-up call to get more involved with him. And at the time, I was involved in Al-Anon and AA. So I thought I knew some things to help him. So I took him to meetings and what have you. And he seemed like he was getting better. And we went to NA meetings together. We did a lot of things. And he journaled, and it looked like things were going well. And then all of a sudden, he started to hang back around with his old crowd. And his older brother, and he talked a lot about it. And my son said, "Well, I don't want Dad to know, I'm back using." He goes, "He knows, and I did know. I could tell by the behavior. So I ramped up what I could to help him more. And the more that I thought I was helping him by getting him to meetings and what have you, because he lost everything, I could feel more distance between us, and I felt more powerless and helpless. And he looked like he was doing well. He was working, things were going good. And then all of a sudden, the sheriff knocked on my door and told me that he had died. It was suicide. He'd hung himself. I couldn't even believe it. And then my wife and I were divorced at that time, and I had to go over and tell her that he had died. And the sheriff was just going to call her. I said, "No, you're not going to do that." And she was on meth and alcohol, living with some ex-biker guy. And she couldn't even understand what I was trying to explain to her about it. And so that was pretty much the frustration, not being able to use what I thought was good for me, but it didn't do apparently anything for him. So
Yeah, that was hard.
Hmm.
Okay, Jason, how about you?
My situation was somewhat similar. my son was in jail for a period of time, and when he got out, he was clean, and you could tell the difference in his demeanor, his attitude, everything. He actually smiled. It had been quite some time since he had that more of a positive outlook on things. So he came to Sacramento with me. I thought I dropped him off at a safe place. It turned out I dropped him off at the worst possible place I could have. I took him down to the Salvation Army. It had been changed into a transitional living environment. And it turned out that that's where he relapsed. He got the stuff from guys that were living there with him. He didn't relapse right away. I introduced him to some men that were part of the meeting that I went to, but it wasn't for him. That was his reaction to it. They hung out a few times. He went to a few meetings, but that's all I knew to do, is to, and that's what AA kind of encourages, is you let other men in the program help a family member, because for some reason family members don't respond well to other family members, whether it be a son, a father, cousins, nephews, whatever. But he rejected that. He was working, but like anything, that doesn't last very long. And after he lost his job, he was kicked out of the recovery center, or the transitional living center, soon after. So he came to stay with me for a few days, or I don't know how long it was, maybe a week. But in that short period of time, he called, between 50 and 100 different places. And I sat here in the garage and in the house with him and watched him call and listened to him talk to people. And like I had mentioned, one gentleman told him it would be easier if he was high or had just stopped using. And he told the guy, it had been a few weeks, but that wasn't enough to get him into a detox. And apparently that's the only way he had any chance of getting into a county or state or local, locally funded facility. So then, and when you're doing something like fentanyl, everything is, it's like Russian roulette. You never know what's going to happen. That was it. I mean, I haven't been back to meetings. I celebrated 3 years and then never went back. I had a hard time listening to the people. Every time I would listen to somebody say something positive, all I could think about was how my son was trapped in this space and just constantly rejected by these people that were supposed to be there to help him. So yeah, that's the gist of it.
Pretty awful. It
Yeah.
was awful to watch.
It's very frustrating, especially when I have the experience of going through the system and having somewhat of a positive outcome. And then here he is, just completely denied. But, he rejected an avenue that I didn't reject. So but you can't make people do what you want them to do. Huh.
No.
That's the bottom line.
How about you, Juana?
Yeah, well, my story's a little bit different. We adopted Caleb when he was 3.5 months old, and he had issues adjusting, of course, at that late stage of development. And so he had a lot of problems. I remember just him spacing out sometimes. And I thought of something when you were talking earlier, Barbara, because I think one of the reasons I felt so out of control was because I was a special ed teacher and a teacher of autism. And so this was back in '84 before there was the spectrum. And I was teaching like an extremely severe autistic student one-on-one with an aide. And I could see some similarities, but he wasn't that autistic. And then while I was working, after Caleb was too old for intervention, they came out with the spectrum information. And I was like, oh, okay. So then I kind of had an idea. So we assumed he was Asperger. And, you know, we went through all the school stuff. You know, we took him to his first psychologist at 6 years old. And she said, well, he's different and you'll just have to accept him. So I just accepted him because I was a teacher of, you know, special needs students. So that's why I think it made it worse that I could not help him. I just, you know, that just kind of dawned on me. And yeah, because I did all the school stuff, all the ARDs, all that. I had to go through all of that fighting with the schools. And my husband was like, I don't even know what the language are speaking. So I had all of that. I did it all. Fought with administrators, all 9 yards. I mean, got a lawyer a couple of times, you know. I mean, it was a fight. It was a battle getting him through school. And then, because he was so smart, they wanted to put him in GT. And I was like, he can't even function, you know. So that added to my frustration of not being able to help my own son, even in the educational process. And finally, when he just got a GED, we got a court-ordered GED early, and he just walked into the local university and took his GED, and he was finished. That was it. So then, you know, he struggled his whole life. I mean, he was 37, I think, when he finished himself off. I guess you could say that's what he was doing with heroin, and he just struggled his whole life. You know, he was homeless for in and out. It was just, you know, 30 years of being helpless. And then, you know, at the end, I think when we flooded, that's when the whole city kind of went mentally ill. Well, I'm in a low income city, and you know, I taught those kids, and I was talking to the police, and they said everybody in the city was having mental health issues. So that was the beginning of the end, actually, because it was like it was probably about 3 to 4 years before, you know, after we got back in, that he died. And a girlfriend, I'd let her come back here for a minute. She was the one that got him hooked on it because she took him in while we were homeless. And I was fixing to send her back to her mother's, and when I told her I was taking her back because my dad was here, and I was afraid they were going to set my kitchen on fire because you couldn't keep them out of the kitchen at night when they'd get high. So I just had to get her out as soon as possible. And when I told her, I was taking her up there. Well, my other son was taking her up home. She OD'd in the front bathroom that night. And then, which we knew was coming. We knew, I kept telling Caleb, it's almost the end. And then he never spoke a word about it. And then 2 weeks later, he just locked himself up in that room and just killed himself. And he came out the last day for me to take him to the hospital, and he died in ICU with all of us there. But yeah, it was a lifelong struggle.
Wow.
You know, and the thing is, there was also, not only was there the pain, but there was the relief, emotionally and financially. You know, it was all mixed up together.
Yeah, that's really hard. My brother was Asperger's and struggled for 66 years.
Yeah.
And when he died, it just felt like a very kind end to a long, painful existence. And so feeling sad and glad is we could do another whole panel about that. Yeah. So the next thing we wanted to talk about is your own journey of the grief. Some people have tons of resources and seem to get through it fast. Some people takes a long, long time. Some people just mask it and move on as if they're perfectly fine when they're really not. But it's kind of a time lapse process. The first year is pretty much everyone knows is awful. But for me, the second year was kind of worse. It was like I was out of the fog now, and I was noticing all the holes in my life. But other people, the timeline is different. So let's talk about your process of grief, like at the beginning, the middle, where you are now, resources you might have found helpful, resources that were not helpful at all, people that showed up and helped you, people that showed up and tortured you, just whatever you want to talk about. And so, Jason, would you like to lead us off this time?
Sure. In the beginning, it was a complete fog. I was devastated. I don't know how long it took, but I was in AA at the time. I was doing meetings, so I tried to get support there, and that seemed to make everything worse for some reason. I just couldn't sit and listen to the people, and it didn't matter what they said or how they said it. I couldn't sit and listen to them because I had this massive emptiness that was just absolutely consuming. I couldn't work for a while, but when I did go back to work, it was luckily I worked for someone that was a close friend, so they kind of put up with me. I did get involved in a grief group. I went, I don't know, half a dozen times, and I started my own grief group at a church not too far from home. That didn't last very long either, maybe 6 months. Then I just kind of pooped out. After 6 or 8 months, maybe 10 months in the first year, I stopped doing anything healthy, as far as, clinically healthy, talking to anybody about what I was going through. The second year, I don't know, I guess I was just on cruise control, to where I knew better than to deny my grief, but I wasn't processing it in a healthy way either. I did begin to learn to give it the proper time that it calls for. I could feel it bottling up. I told my wife I was going to do this panel, and I told her what I had mentioned as my topic, and she says, "You don't do that very well. You don't process it very well. You get real short." That's one of my flags, is when I know I'm getting short with people around me, I give myself time alone or with my dogs to process the grief that's built up. But it gets bad. This month, I stay away from people. It actually started last month. His birthday was May 4th, and it starts about the beginning of May. I can feel it coming. So I get much more busy, and I keep people further away. I don't know. I guess it'll get better. I've been told it gets better the 4th year. But I don't have any expectations. It'll be what it is. I feel like I process it okay. I know there are holes throughout how I deal with it, and I can see what would help, but I don't have the willingness to get out there and do it. And I'm very aware of that. Not yet. That's about
So
all.
what are your ideas? What's the take in your head of what you should be doing now?
Making the effort to help other people. That's what made me most healthy. And I know that if I were to get out of my mess and make an effort to begin to participate in the grief groups or even go back to meetings and help new people that are trying to get sober, who are actually in the same position my son was in, it would probably get a little better, but I'm just not, I guess you could say I'm not ready for it.
Yeah.
In time, maybe.
And so sometimes when I realize I'm completely out of gas on emotional resources, the idea of going and adding other stuff, it just feels like trying to get water out of an empty bucket.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah.
I convince myself I have too much to do around the house, so it's true, but you can always make time if you want to.
True. Those are uniform ideas we all have. I'm going to go clean the bathroom. I think I'd rather scoop the dog poop than go out there.
Yeah, yeah. I do have 6 dogs, so there's a lot.
Okay, thank you. Lana, to talk about your very complicated grief journey with all of that at once.
Well, it went pretty well, better than expected. It just kind of hit in after the initial shock. It just hits in those waves, that come out of nowhere. And I got to spend a lot of time alone, which was really welcomed because I had so many people through my house, and I still have my grandson living with me, but he's not here very much. So I've got rooms up front and I have my self-contained. So people have been in and out, but basically I spent most of my time alone. And I like being alone with my dog and which I just had to put down in July. And I had a lot of grief about that. It was surprisingly. It kind of was a window back into the other grief through we're years ago. And that was kind of an unusual feeling, but, so I had a lot of time alone and I used it to process, and I had been through some therapy and had a nice session with Barbara. And I just processed, and I turned to my to further my spiritual path. So I spent a lot of time reading and just meditating, basically contemplating, and then also I had a new batch of grandkids, little babies, and I'm fixing to have a new grandchild. I don't know if my 37-year-old son, who's never been married, is still not married. He's having his first child, and that's another baby. I've got a 4-month-old step grandchildren, and so my step grandchildren, they're the oldest of mine is 10. So I'll have newborn to 10. So they really helped a lot. And then my animals, my dog helped a lot. So it was just processing what, I knew to do. And then I had my family and my sister and my family, and the kids were just, you can't be sad around kids like that. So that was a good distraction. So basically, it's just when it hits me and I cry and I feel it. And I also talk to my son. And, we could kind of communicate on the inner. We had that connection. And because basically I was the only person on earth besides my mother, who's deceased, that he actually trusted and could. I mean, he loved his dad, but they just didn't jive. I understood him because I was trained for one thing, but he did get a diagnosis of schizoid personality disorder. So when he was in middle school.
Oh,
Yeah, that what I thought was autism, they share very similar characteristics. I learned from Caleb that, and it comes from the same part of the brain. So that was kind of a new twist to the plot. So we just,
yeah.
I just had to go through it. I was all by myself and I just went through it. I had to be there for him and I did the best I could, but I couldn't stop it.
Yep. Yeah.
It just,
Grandkids are awesome, aren't they?
yeah. Yeah. I just talked to God a whole bunch through all that, trying to figure out what to do, but I had to let go.
Yep. Okay, thank you. That's a lot. Okay, Harry, talk about your journey to where you are now.
Well, um, a- in the Al-Anon and AA and NA, they talk about, we're humans trying to learn a spiritual existence, and I've always said it's the other way around.
Yes.
We're spiritual beings trying to learn a human existence and understand and go through it much like Christ did. And so, with that being said, it's been pretty much an unusual spiritual journey. People, places, and things have come out of nowhere at the proper time to help with the situation, Barbara being one of them. Um, I, the pastor in our church that I was attending, younger pastor, very gifted young man. He knew what was going on when we met him, and we gave him Christy and I gave him a quick Reader's Digest version of us, and he said, you're going to be able to help people I'm never going to reach. So he asked me to do a meeting in church, and so I prepared a PowerPoint presentation, and I had a picture of myself and my wife and my two boys. And then I had the Serenity Prayer up there, and I said, for those of you that have never seen it, this is the Serenity Prayer, blah, blah, blah. And then I had the picture of us, and I said, we look just like the Leave It to Beaver family, all that stuff. And I said, hard to believe you're looking at 4 alcoholics, and you could have heard a pin drop. So at the end of the presentation, the pastor came up and closed the service, and as I was walking off I guess it's an altar. I was raised Catholic, so that's what they call it. We're stepping down. There was a group of people I'd never seen before. They weren't the people that always say, "Hey, brother, how you doing?" These were people that were in the shadows, and they were thanking me for helping them understand that they had an alcoholic brother, aunt, uncle, son, whatever. These people were rushing to get information, and it was overwhelming. And then as I was leaving to go through the breezeway over to the auditorium, one of the women that was cooking for the lunch, she said, I heard your testimony in church. And I said, oh, well, thank you. She goes, no, thank you, because you just taught me uh, how I am enabling my son.
Mm.
And then I turned and I saw what I call this wild-eyed 12-stepper woman. I saw her. She was making a beeline towards me, and I thought, oh, God, no, please. And she came up and she grabbed my arm and said, this morning when I woke up, I knew I needed a meeting, but I knew I had to get to church. And so I wrestled with that. And I just stepped out in faith. and went to church, and you did a meeting in church. Those kind of, excuse me, I apologize. Those kind of events, I would never be able to talk with anybody about anything that I've gone through. But this experience has burst upon me to be willing to share experience, strength, and hope to other people. The pastor of that church, he had heard about a recovery program called the Genesis program, and he wanted me to go, and I did. It was a 5-day class, 8 to 5, and it was taught by the second gentleman in charge. And they're headquartered, their mission in Las Vegas. What place better to be for addiction? And by the time Tuesday morning, about 10:30, we took a break, and I walked up to Dean and I said, "This is the most fantastic thing I've ever heard. This helps people after 12 step because they don't know what to do. They do the 12 steps, and now what?" And so the idea was I was supposed to do that in church and help create a men's program and what have you. And then politics got in the way and stopped that. But personally, it did a lot for myself. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that the spiritual side of my life has become much more active and much more willing to listen and learn and not judge people like I used to. And even if I do, I quickly take a step back and realize that they probably didn't have the most wonderful childhood either. And I meet a lot of nice people and help a lot of people and explain my story, and they're grateful that they've heard it. And so that kind of stuff seems to help, the best I can say.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. So just for this last round, if you could think of one thing that you want someone who's watching this video to take away, if they forget everything else we all say and just walk away with one thing about grieving the loss of a child with mental illness and addiction, what would it be? Juana would like to go first.
Yeah, I just thought of something that I try to use is let me see if I can just remember. You know, my brain's fried, y'all, because that stress is coming up.
How about Harry? Would you like to go, and Juana can wait for that? Harry go around to get back around to.
I need a pencil to write it down. So.
Okay, so Harry.
Well, I would say the most important takeaway is don't beat yourself up for not knowing what you don't know. And try to be more patient with yourself, the frustration that you come up and why did they do this? Why? You're never going to know the demons in somebody else's head, but you can learn how to deal with it better and go get help, find people, be willing to seek help and not try to be the tough guy and all this stuff like we're taught for the movies and all that junk. That to me, I wish I would have been more willing to learn how to help him. But that's what I would say. Just try to be more compassionate to yourself and to them.
Oh, thanks, Harry. Okay, Juana, you ready?
I remember, yes. I always try to remember that our grief is love unexpressed.
Mm.
And so that's when I talked to Caleb. I expressed my love to him. I just start talking to him on the other side. And it kind of just helped me. I would just talk to him a lot like that over the last 3 years. And yeah, and then the fact that was kind of weird. I didn't mention about the dog portal. That was unusual because when my dog died, he was 17 and he was a very intuitive, like a therapy type dog. He was real in tune with people. And I grieved more for him than I did my dad. And I was really grieving my dad because we sat next to each other for 22 months, daddy. And the dog, like I told my sister, I was like, I feel kind of bad because I'm really grieving this dog. And my people, they come in lightning spells, those blindsided, but the dog was just steady. And it was just opened up all the grief for the other 3 people. Because the girl that lived here, I did love her. She was temporarily, she didn't stay here, but it was so sad. I mean, her whole life story, it broke my heart. And I had, and so, I just loved her too. And all 3 of them, Woody opened it all up like a big scab or something, I guess, pulled off and everything. So I just went through that, that was in April 1st. The dog, I had to put him down. Yeah, he was dementia and everything. But yeah, love is just grief. I mean, grief is love unexpressed. So, and then I guess maybe that's why being able to express my love with these little grandchildren helped a lot too. Maybe so. I know they helped me. Okay.
That's great. I totally agree with that. That was why I started my grief journal on Facebook, where someone told me to try to write some of that out so it didn't wander around my body as a big ball of sadness. And even working on it now, trying to do the audio version of them, it's sad all over again. Okay, Jason, how about you? What would you want people to have as their takeaway?
That emptiness isn't who I am. I had to remember that because it's very consuming in the beginning. I didn't see any light at the end of the tunnel. And it was infinitely worse than anything I experienced back in active addiction. And it gets pretty bad through that mess. But what I don't know, what I knew and the support I was getting, it just reminded me that it isn't who I am. It's what I'm experiencing. And I heard that saying in a little daily devotional. It's our love expressed towards the person that's gone. That's all the grief is. And there is light at the end of the tunnel, even though I can't see it. I think that would be the most important thing that I would want to remind someone. Some days really, really suck. I mean, they're pretty bad. And I would hate to be the person that crossed my path. But other days I do feel better. And it does get better. Some days are better than others. Some days aren't so great. But that's all.
That's great. So thank you all so much for doing this. As is painfully obvious, this is the first time I've tried doing this, so I'm sure we'll get lots of comments from people who want to know, why don't I act like I know what I'm doing? Because I don't. And so if this has been helpful to those of you that are watching it, please subscribe to my channel so that you know when the next one of these is hitting. And if you would like to participate on a panel with or without technical expertise, please contact me through my my Facebook page, The Journey of Grief, Becoming Us Without Them, and I would love to have you on the panel. And so thank you very much, and I hope that all of your grief work is getting better and not worse. And thank you.
Thank you, Barbara.